Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks, and welcome to another fun-filled, action-packed, and intellectually stimulating edition of This Week of Weather. I'm your host, meteorologist DT from weatherist.com, the Colonel of Confusion, the Captain of Catastrophe, the Commander of Chaos. Let's talk about this week in weather. And here on Weatherist, we had a couple of different things to talk about, so we'll get right to it here. Obviously, a lot of weather to talk about. There's Tropical Storm Fred and the rainy pattern coming up, and the drought developing in portions of the Mid Atlantic, and all sorts of stuff. So let's get right to it. First, this is a latest from NASA. This is August 9th here, the groundwater drought indicator. And you can see that in the Shenandoah Valley, in West Virginia, in western Pennsylvania, western Maryland, in Ohio, place like that, there has been quite a bit of dryness over the last several weeks, and as a result, we're seeing drought conditions developing. Now, if you look at southeast Virginia and eastern North Carolina, Hampton Roads, they're actually pretty close to normal rainfall. So it's actually been that one particular area in the eastern United States which has really become the problem area. Eastern Ohio, western Pennsylvania, western half of Maryland, the Shenandoah Valley, and West Virginia. And if we look at the precipitation, we can see since July 1st, this is the total precipitation for the month, for the whole U.S. But again, if we just focus on the eastern U.S., let's say from the Mississippi River eastward, we can see a lot of yellows and oranges, which is anywhere from the orange really 3 to 6 inch rains. And some areas in the Ohio Valley, Indiana, Ohio, a place like that, 6 to 9 inch rains. That's since July 1st. But relative to normal, we can see that the percentage relative to normal since July 1st, very dry there in the western half of Virginia, western Maryland, central Maryland, southwest Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio, West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, western North Carolina, Tennessee, places like that. And you can see the rainfall anomalies are around 50% of normal. I mean, it's not terribly bad drought, but it is drought developing those conditions. Meanwhile, Ohio and Indiana, Illinois, they've had fairly wet conditions since July 1st, also all the southern states as well. If we look at it more detail, you can see since July 1st, there's the dryness in the Shenandoah Valley, in western Maryland, much of West Virginia. And again, relative, you can see the actual precipitation since July 1st, and you can see, that light orange color is 2 to 4 inches in here, and then in some areas 1 inch actually. So along the coastal areas, and New England's been wet, New York State's been wet, southeast Virginia, eastern North Carolina, no problems there with the rainfall at all. And you can see the percentages relative to normal. Here it really stands out. New England's done very well with rainfall in the last 45 days. So has New York State. New Jersey's done well. Southeast third of Virginia, eastern North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio's done okay, western Ohio. But there's our dryness, western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, southwest Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley, western and central Maryland, and all of West Virginia. And one of the reasons for this is because of the teleconnections here. Now, this is the P&A pattern. This is, the ridge on the west coast. If you look at the Arctic Oscillation, the North American Oscillation, those are the two Atlantic teleconnections. They're neutral. They've been dead neutral for a couple of weeks, not doing anything. If you look at the EPO, it's also not a factor. But the main one driving the pattern right now is the P&A. And you can see the black lines here is where it was. So we were positive, in early August. That's when we got chilly. We had the big ridge on the west coast, the big trough on the east, and we got the temperatures below normal into the first week of August. Now look at the lines. You can see the black lines where it becomes the color lines of the different model projections. It goes positive here in around August 15th or so. Get a ridge on the west coast, then it goes back down to negative again. And then from, let's say, August 15th all the way to the end of the month, most of the models keep the P&A negative, which means a trough on the west coast and a ridge in the eastern U.S. So that's a fairly dry looking map generally. Could be stormy for the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and New England, but it also has implications for the hurricane season, because when you have a trough on the west coast and a ridge in the eastern United States, you have increased chances of seeing U.S. landfalling hurricanes and tropical storms. This is the upper air map here, valid as of this is valid as of August 13th. There's our big trough coming through. You can see it right in Canada there, the big ridge on the west coast, and there's our ridge over the southeast United States. So the trough is driving the cold front through, and it's going to bring some rain here. Now, but this is about the time we get to This is the actual map here from August 10th. Actually, so let's do it this way. Here's the ridge. You can see it right there over the southeastern states. That is Fred there, south of Puerto Rico. There's the trough over the Canada and the upper plains, the Canadian prairies. And what happens is, we go back to the previous slide. There you go. There's the big trough here on August 13th, driving the system, the cold fronts into the New England and the Mid-Atlantic region. Now, meanwhile, Fred is still a fairly weak-looking system on the GFS here, but that's going to change. All right, now this is the service map here. So this is now for Thursday evening. We can see one weak front running from Georgia through western North Carolina, western Virginia, and that's going to bring some pretty good showers and thunderstorms to the drought areas there on Thursday evening. There's another front coming down. You can see in the Great Lakes into Iowa and Chicago, that area there. And here's the surface map. This is now Friday evening. Friday evening, you can see the main cold front is west of the Appalachian Mountains. It's in western New York State, Ohio, southern Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, bringing pretty good rain, showers and thunderstorms. That's going to be for Friday evening, and probably Friday night into Saturday morning. These storms will hit the drought areas, the dry areas in West Virginia, western Maryland, and eastern Kentucky, places like that. And we can see that here. This is now, the front pushes all the way through. This is now Saturday night. Big, nice Canadian high pressure areas. So if you're on the Great Lakes, New England, you got a really nice weekend coming up with that high coming down. But that front's going to stall. You see what this front does? This is now Saturday evening. So all day Saturday, you got rain all across southern New Jersey, maybe southeast Pennsylvania, the Delmarva, most of Maryland, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, except for eastern North Carolina. They stay sunny and hot. And then most of Virginia. This is a pretty nice front, and it's going to be slow moving, and it's going to produce some rain. And this is now here Sunday evening. The front hasn't moved. You can see it's still stuck right across there. Now DC's probably got partly sunny. The rain stopped there. Pennsylvania's nice. Look at that big high, very nice for mid-August over Lake Michigan, Lake Huron. I mean, ideal in Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New York State, Ohio, perfect. But along the front, eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, southern and central Virginia, southern West Virginia. This is a good rainy front here, going to bring a lot of showers and storms. Here's the total rainfall for the next 5 days. Pretty good rains in Ohio, Indiana, and then getting some of those rains in the dry areas in western and central and northern North Carolina, western North Carolina, eastern Kentucky. Not great rains, but better. Definitely a step in the right directions. Notice not much the next 5 days in southeast Virginia and central and eastern North Carolina or South Carolina. The front doesn't get there. All right, let's talk about the MJO, the Maddie and Julian oscillation. We forecast as we look at this because it gives us an idea of where the weather pattern is going to be. Each one of these different phases has a different corresponding weather pattern depending on which month it is. So this is the European model, and we can see that it takes the feature here, if you can follow the arrow, right there in phase 1 and brings it out into phase 1 and 2 right by the border there, then swings it out into phase 2 for most middle of August, and then briefly into phase 3 here by the August 24th, the last week of August. And this is the Australian model, which is the best MJO model in the world, and you can clearly see the plots. Again, takes it on phase 1 out to phase 2 here by August 15th, 18th, and then keeps it in phase 2 for most of the month, and then making phase 3 by early September. Now, the reason why that's important is because let's look at this here. We can clearly see that during phase 2, look how wet the East Coast is. See this? This matches the model so nicely. It's just wonderful when the MJO is strong like this because it really tells you what's happening. Now the Midwest is pretty dry, but look at the rain from Alabama and Georgia up to Pennsylvania and New York State. And the temperatures, with the cloud cover and the rain, the heat breaks as well. So that's pretty nice to see, and that's a fairly wet looking pattern. And again, it matches the maps very nicely, I must say. It really does. So let me bring that back. There we go. And we can see this in phase 3. This is phase 3 in August and phase 3 in September. Phase 3 in August is dry on when it gets into there in August, but again, it looks like it's not going to get into phase 3 until September. So phase 3 in September here, if it happens then, is very dry on the East Coast and the Midwest, but there's no heat. So there you go. Let's talk about Fred. Now that's the latest satellite picture here. This midnight, you can see it's the south of Puerto Rico. It's not a greatly organized system. It's got some nice feeder bands. You can see these bands here pulling it in. These feeder arms, very nice. And if it was to have a great nicer track, it could really develop here. The problem is there's a surface map. You can see it. It's very close to Puerto Rico, and it's going to go. Maybe it'll make it through the Mona Passage, but it might go over a portion of Hispaniola. Certainly, the circulation is going to be impacted by it, and that's going to really restrict the intensification. This does not look like a hurricane at all at any point in a track that I can see for the next several days. It just does not. This is the vortex data message, the Hurricane Recon plane from earlier on this Tuesday evening, which is why they upgraded it at 10 p.m. This evening they upgraded the tropical storm. You can clearly see that it is now. You look at the letter H, surface wind 35 knots. You can clearly see that it is circulation. Very nice warming here in the I core at P, Q, and R. You can see the temperatures warming very nicely. And maximum flight level winds 43 knots, 71 miles from the center. So it's a storm. And there's the official track at 11 p.m. It goes right over Hispaniola. Now it takes it north of Cuba. If it goes over Hispaniola and it's weak like this, it may track more to a little more to the west northwest and go over Cuba. So that is a real possibility, and they have the cone doing that. So we'll see if it actually does this. Now, if it takes a further west track, that means it's more likely to hit the far western end of the Florida Panhandle or maybe Mississippi or Alabama coast if it does that. Now, we've been talking about this for a while. I mentioned this in the 3-week newsletter last week and the week before. There were strong indications that the hurricane season was finally going to wake up here in August. And obviously it's going to do that anyway because it's August. But the reason why is this is the 200 millibar velocity potential anomaly. So this is the amount of energy in the atmosphere. And the green, without getting too technical for y'all, the green and the blues represent negative or rising motion, which means increased thunderstorms, increased storminess. It's and more low pressure. So the area in blue and black I've highlighted here. If you look at the bottom of the map, you see South America, Atlantic Ocean. That's the Atlantic Basin, from around 20 west out to about 80. And you can see that if you look at the time on the left hand side here of this image, August 7th, August 9th, August 11th, 13th, 15th, 17th, look at the strong greens and even blues showing up here. This is very strong energy in the atmosphere, which is going to become favorable for tropical systems to develop. Big waves coming off Africa, intensifying in the Atlantic Basin, threatening the U.S. coast, threatening the Caribbean. Now, this was as of August 7th. I can show you the images back from August 1. I mean, this has been showing up on the models for a long time that there's going to be increased activity. Now, this is the latest one from August 10th. And again, look at the very strong blues here, August 13th to 15th. Very, very favorable in the Atlantic Basin for intensification of other additional tropical waves coming off Africa. Now, as we go towards the end of the month, there is some sinking air. The oranges and the yellows represent sinking air, and the reds represent a lot of suppression. So you get no storm development. So there is some suppression here showing up in the Caribbean Basin. The Atlantic Basin remains very active. Now, interestingly enough, this is another way of looking at it. This is for the next 5 days. You can see the strong blues in the Caribbean Basin and then the light greens and blues across the entire Atlantic Basin all the way to Africa. Very favorable for tropical development. Meanwhile, look at the western Pacific Ocean. Solid reds and oranges there, meaning sinking air, which means suppressed tropical development in those areas. Now, the GFS, again, this is week 1. Not showing the same sort of thing. It has a lot of positive energy in South America and the South Atlantic, but not that much in the tropical Atlantic. It's kind of neutral in the Eastern Atlantic, and you only have a little bit of activity in the Caribbean Basin. The European in the 6 to 10 day, again, the strong negative anomalies shift into the Atlantic Ocean and Africa. A good sign for Cape Verde hurricane season, no doubt about that. But look at the GFS. So this is the same product, but this is the way the GFS Ensemble looks at it. And this one before, this is how the European Ensemble looks at it. So these are very different. These maps do not match at all. The GFS here has sinking air in the Cape Verdes, which would indicate a suppression of the Cape Verde hurricane season during late August going into September. So that's not The big differences there. This is the European Ensemble. It just came out here, and you can see for the next 45 days. And if you look at the top right here, there's the blues and the greens out to August 21. Then we want to look at the Atlantic Basin. We can see pretty much neutral conditions here for the first half of September. Of course, that speculation is going to change as we get closer to it, but it's the first half of September. The Cape Verde hurricane season looks kind of neutral based upon the 200 millibar velocity potential anomalies. And the GFS is totally different. Look at this. Going into late week, this is week 3, 14 to 20 day, totally suppresses all tropical activity in the Atlantic. So the GFS is very different from what the European is showing here. Now let's talk about Fred itself. Here's the 18Z track. Notice it goes up right along north of Cuba, through the Florida Keys into the Eastern Caribbean, then it turns to the north. I think the next one is going to be, this is the GFS Ensemble. Notice it's got much more activity across Cuba here. And I think that's a real concern. And now the 0Z does the same sort of thing. Notice right over, but here, notice it stays north of Cuba, right? Into the Florida Straits. But now it cuts across more of eastern Hispaniola and the Dominican Republic. So, you know, it's going to hit one of these islands. And that's really going to hurt it and restrict development. Oops. I'll go back here a couple of slides. I jumped the gun. There we go. So here we go. So this is the Recon. You can see from earlier. Again, the flight level winds. You know, look at the blue lines here in the upper left. 43 knots. Yeah, that's about right. And the surface winds. You know, with a couple of wind gusts of 35 knots, it's not very impressive. Just isn't. But lowest pressure, I'll get what 1,009, 1,008, something like that. Now let's talk about what happens here. This is now the upper end map, valid August 15th. So here's our high pressure ridge off the North Carolina coast, and there is Fred in Florida. This X here represents a piece of energy over Iowa in the Mississippi Valley. So it's going to go around this high and interact with that piece of energy, that shortwave energy in Iowa, and then it's going to turn to the northeast and go up the spine of the Appalachians. Or that's what it looks like. And you can see that even more so. Here's the European. There's the ridge. Look at the ridge here over the Florida, southeast U.S. coast. There's the disturbance in Michigan and Ohio, and it's extending down to Arkansas. So what's going to happen is the low pressure area, which is Fred, is going to be on the Florida peninsula, and it's going to track up right through into this area here, up through from Georgia to Virginia, and right around the western periphery of the high. I mean, it's a pretty easy forecast. This is not complicated, not this one. And the European ensembles show this very nicely. You can see this is now the projection from Fred. This is the this was let's say with the August 9th. You can see it. So this is yesterday's. All the models are taking the Florida, the southeast U.S. coast. There's another depression behind it. And if we look at the different projections here, this is the European model. This is today's European, the Tuesday afternoon run. There's the low down in Texas, the heavy rain. It already has rain going up into Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania ahead of the system. There's the low going through the Shenandoah Valley. You can clearly see that. This is going to produce a lot of rain. You get orographic lifting like this and tropical moisture. It's going to produce a lot of rain. And then there it is right there. You can see on the evening of August 18th into the 19th, maybe over DC or Culpeper, Warrenton, something like that. A lot of rain in Virginia, going up into Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York City, and southern New England as a rainstorm. This is purely a rainstorm, not a tropical system, not a hurricane. It's completely a big old rainstorm, coastal low pressure area. But look at the rains. The rains are going up in the models with each run because the models are seeing the impact of the tropical inflow and the low pressure area. And you can see that, you can look at the dark blue there. That's 10 inches of rain in the Shenandoah Valley and the Virginia Piedmont. That's a lot of rain, folks. Widespread 1 to 5 inch rains here with isolated amounts. Again, look at the mountains of western North Carolina, getting crushed with the rains here. Orographic lifting, all of it. And finally, well, not quite finally, but almost finally, you can see there's the next tropical depression forming off the Caribbean, off the coast of Africa. You can see right there in the middle of the screen at the bottom of the image, and there's another big bomb system in southwest Africa, likely to move off the next couple of days. So the African wave train, the Cape Verde wave train is kicking in full gear here. This is a very impressive system in the South Tropical Atlantic at around 25-30 west longitude and around 11 or 12 north latitude. And you can see this is now Tuesday's European ensemble, and for 120 hours, there's the first system over Florida. It looks like it stays just north of Cuba, goes into Florida Straits, and goes up towards either the Florida Panhandle or Mississippi or Alabama. And then there's a next depression following behind it, right behind it. You can clearly see that with a big cluster of low pressure areas approaching Antigua in the northeast Leeward Islands. And then there it is, 192 hours out, which is, I guess this would be August 18th. So you can see the track through Georgia or Alabama up through the Appalachian Mountains headed towards Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And the next one, a bit of a spread there naturally, anywhere from Cuba to the Bahamas. With that next system. And then finally, this is the 270-hour European ensemble. You can see the big trough on the west coast, a big ridge, and that means it's favorable for tropical systems to make landfall or threaten in some capacity, not necessarily landfall, but definitely increased risk of it in the Gulf of Mexico and the southeast U.S. and New England coast because of this sort of upper air pattern. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it is a real possibility. Anyhow, that is the that's my forecast for the time. I guess we'll have another update either tomorrow or on Thursday, depending on how things look. This is meteorologist DT from Weather Risk, and I will see you over on the Facebook page and on the Twitter page.